திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். புழியர்கோன் வெப்பொழித்த புகழியர்கோன் கடல் போற்றி, ஆழிமிசை கல்மிதப்பில் அணைந்த பிரான் அடி போற்றி, வாழி திரு நாவலூர் வன்றொண்டர் பதம் போற்றி, ஊழிமலி திருவாத ஊரர் திருத்தாள் போற்றி. திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். So we have been discussing the 6th verse in tiruttoṇḍattogai. I will just read the verse first and then we'll continue with the stories in that. வார்கொண்ட வனமுலையாள் உமைபங்கன் கழலே, மறவாது கல் எறிந்த சாக்கியர்க்கும் அடியேன், சீர்கொண்ட புகழ்வள்ளல் சிறப்புலிக்கும் அடியேன், செங்காட்டங் குடிமேய சிறு தொண்டர்க்கடியேன், கார்கொண்ட கொடைக்கழறிற்றறிவார்க்கும் அடியேன், கடற்காழி கணநாதன் அடியார்க்கும் அடியேன், ஆர்கொண்ட வேர்க்கூற்றன் கலந்தைக்கோன் அடியேன், ஆரூரன் ஆரூரில் அம்மானுக்காளே. So in this 6th verse, last time we had met, we had seen the stories of the first few devotees in this. We had seen Sakya nAyanAr story, we had seen the Sirapuli nAyanAr story, and we had seen Tiruttondar nAyanAr story. So today we are going to continue from the story of kazhaRitRu aRivAr. It's a little bit of a tongue twister name for some of you. kazhaRitRu aRivAr. kazhaRitRu means to speak, and aridal means to know. So this kazhaRitRu aRivAr had the ability to know what anyone or anything said. So not just humans, but even animals, birds and animals. So whatever anything said, he instinctively he knew what that was communicated. So that is his special description that Sundarar is describing. So kar konda kodai kazhaRitRu arivarkum adiyen. Kar means the cloud, kodai means gift. So we know that the most important and the greatest gift that we get is the gift from the clouds, the rain. So whenever you are using describing how great somebody is, how generous somebody is, we typically compare it with the rain cloud. So he's as generous as the rain cloud. That's the meaning of that. Kar konda kodai. So somebody who is as generous as the rain cloud. Means rain cloud gives the rain that sustains all the living beings, but it doesn't require or expect anything in return. That is an ultimate gift. So that's what is used here, that this saint, kazhaRitRu aRivAr, was a very generous person who gave like the rain cloud. So there are two things that are said about this saint. He is very generous, and he could understand anything that everything that is said by any living being. So those are the two things that he says, and to that saint I am a devotee. Now most people, even though the Periya Puranam and in tiruttoṇḍattogai he refers to the saint as kazhaRitRu aRivAr, in common parlance he is known as chEramAn perumAL nayanmar. So as you can see, chEramAn means chEra. chEramAn perumAL means the Chera king. As you know, in the Tamil speaking part of the southern India, they had 3 kingdoms or 3 kings, major kings. The Chora king, they ruled the Kaveri belt, Kaveri delta. That is the Chora kingdom, all the Kaveri region. And the southern part, southeastern part is Madurai and Rameswaram and Tirunelveli, that region. That was Pandya kingdom. And the Chera kingdom was the part that was on the western side of the Western Ghats. The coastal kingdom, what we today call as Keralam, that is Chera kingdom in the olden days. So today, the Chera kingdom that part is we call that Keralam, and they speak Malayalam. But 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it was considered the Chera kingdom, and Malayalam was not documented as a separate language, but it was probably a dialect, regional dialect of Tamil in that region. So the king of that Chera kingdom is known as chEramAn perumAL. Chera means the kingdom, Man means the chief, and perumAL also means the chief. So basically the Chera king is known as chEramAn perumAL. So that king is how he is, that is how he is usually referred. In the 63 nayanmar list, when somebody says, chEramAn perumAL nayanAr, that means this person. Now we will look at his story. So chEramAn perumAL nayanAr, or kazhaRitRu aRivAr, was a contemporary of Sundarar, and he was born in the royal family of the Chera king in a place called Kodungolur. Kodungolur is about maybe 40-45 kilometers from Thrissur. So if you have been to Keralam, or if you know the idea of Keralam, you know where Thrissur is. And this is Kodungolur is about 40-45 kilometers from Thrissur. And so this nayanAr was born in the royal family, and as a child he grew up to be very devoted, with a lot of devotion, and he was always with Shiva Bhakti and all that. So at some point in time, maybe when he reached his late teen years, he wanted to be fully immersed in service to Shiva. So he goes to the place called tiruttoṇḍattogai, which is the temple there, Shiva temple, and he sets up a place to live near the temple, and he lives there, spending all his time in devotion to Shiva, worshipping Shiva, doing service, all those things. And so he was living there, doing Shiva service. He had no worldly interest. After a number of years, right, the Chera king, whoever was the Chera king at the time, he reached old age, and he decided that he doesn't want to be bothered with the worldly activities of being the king and taking care of the royal matters and all that. So he decided to leave the power. He decided to go to Vanaprastham. In Indian tradition, Vanaprastham is when one reaches old age and they separate from the worldly life and they enter into the tapas. They will go into a forest area, and they and their wife, they settle down in an ashramam, and then they set up some. But they move away from the worldly life and into spiritual, focus on spiritual things. So he decided to do that, and he told his ministers that whatever, from this day onwards, I'm going to go to Vanaprastham and I will give up my power. So he does that and goes away. So the ministers, they try to figure out who should be the next king. And after looking at the royal family and who is who and where is who, etc., they decide that the next person who should come to power is this person, who is our nayanAr, who is in Tirunajikalam. So the ministers come to Tirunajikalam and meet our nayanAr and tell him, sir, the king has left the king power. He has gone to Vanaprastham, and we need a king, and you are the next right person to take up the role of the king. So please come and accept and be our king. And our nayanAr, he had no interest in worldly life. He was happily in Shiva service, fully in devotion, and he had no worldly desires, no desire for power. He doesn't want to be bothered with the royal duties, because that will interfere with his Shiva service. So he had no interest, but the ministers kept requesting him, you have to come and you have to accept this for the welfare of the country. So the nAyanAr goes to the Anjaikalam temple. The Thiruvanjaikalam temple in today's name is called Thiruvanjikulam, right? But in the olden name is Thiruvanjaikalam. So he goes to the temple and worships Shiva and seeks Shiva's guidance. And then he receives Shiva's guidance. Shiva bestows his grace on him and says, I will give you the ability to rule the kingdom. I will also give you the ability to know what anything says. With that, you will be able to rule, and you will be able to continue your service to me. So, after he receives Shiva's grace and these abilities, so he comes out and tells the ministers that he will be the king. So, on an auspicious day, he gets coronation, and he is coronated as a king. Then he comes to the temple, he worships Shiva, and then he is on his way back to the palace. So he is riding on his elephant. The kings ride on elephants, and so especially in Chera kingdom, which is where many of the elephants in South India are. So he was riding on the elephant, and as he was riding on the elephant, he saw somebody walking on the opposite direction on the street. And that person had a bag on his shoulder, and his body was all covered in white. So he immediately jumps down, because he sees a Shiva devotee. He jumps down and walks up to that person and worships him with the folded hands and says, and then the person who was walking on the street, he drops his bag, and then he is, with his folded hands, "O king, I don't know who you thought I am. I am an ordinary washerman. I am a dhobi." Because the washerman was carrying a bag of salt, in the kind of salt that they use for washing clothes and removing dirt and other things, right? The kind of soap kind of stones. He was carrying a bag of that, and because of some drizzle, that some of the salt had dissolved and dripped on his body, and then the body got dried in the sun, so his body was all covered in white salt. But the king thought that he was a Shiva devotee covered in holy ash. So the washerman says, "Swami, I am your servant. I am an ordinary washerman." And then the king says, "I am your servant chEramAn." Right? He says he's the king, but he says, "I am servant chEramAn. Sir, your body, your looks made me think of a Shiva devotee because of this white color. But don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, nothing will happen to you. Go home. No, don't worry." And then king gets back on the elephant and goes to the kingdom, to the palace. And so he has been, ruling the Chera kingdom in a just manner, and always taking care of his Shiva worship as well. And as he was ruling there, Shiva plays some leelas in his life. There is a temple singer in Madurai known as Panapatrar, and he has been a singer with a lot of devotion, and he has been worshipping Shiva for a long time. But he was he was in poverty. So Shiva decides to make him rich. So what Shiva does is that Shiva goes in the dream of Panapatra and says, I will give you a letter. You take this letter to the Chera king and he will give you wealth. So Panapatra wakes up and then finds that he has got a palm leaf manuscript. And in the palm leaf manuscript there is a Tamil verse. No, it says, it's the verse will go like Madhimali Purisai, Mada Kodal, etc., etc. Basically, it says it's a letter from Shiva to the Chera king. The first few lines talk about I, the Shiva dwelling in Madurai, etc., etc., sending this letter to you, the Chera king, who is so and so and so. And then it says, like you, this Panapatran is a sincere devotee of mine, and he is coming to you to see you, and make sure you give him a lot of wealth. Something like that. And then Panapatra is so happy to find that he has got a palm leaf manuscript that Shiva has given to him. So with great joy, he takes that palm leaf manuscript and takes on a journey to go to the Chera kingdom and goes to the Chera king's palace, and then the announces to the guards that he is from Madurai and Shiva has given him a letter to be given to the king. And as soon as they go and tell the king is overjoyed. Because he is a great Shiva devotee, so he is overjoyed. So he comes running to invite Panapatra and welcomes him, and then Panapatra gives him that palm leaf manuscript. And the Chera king reads the palm leaf manuscript, and then he is so happy that Shiva had sent this great devotee to him so that he can be of service to him and Shiva. So he calls his ministers, asks them to load up, bring out all the wealth that he has got in his treasury, and he puts them in front of Panapatra and says, Sir, all this is yours, and not only that, you should take over the kingdom, the Chera kingdom, and rule here as the Chera king, please. And then Panapatra is amazed at the generosity of this king, that not only gives all his wealth from his treasury, but he is also asking him to take over the kingdom. Now, which king will say that? Panapatra says, Sir, O king, it is Shiva's order that I get the wealth that I need from you, and that's all I should take from you. So I will take whatever wealth you want to give me, but I don't want the kingdom. You be the king and you rule the kingdom. So chEramAn king, the chEramAn perumAL was, brings out elephants and horses and loads the riches on those horses and elephants, and sends some more people, and with them he sends off Panapatra back to Madurai. So Panapatra comes back to Madurai with all the wealth that he needs. So this is Shiva's Leela. If Shiva wanted to give wealth to Panapatra, he could have given him in Madurai itself, right? He could have just, in an instant he can give. We have seen that in nAyanAr, right? One of the stories we have seen previously in our sessions. nAyanAr was a Brahmana devotee who was living in Tirukadavur, and he was burning Kunguliyam, which is an incense, at the temple. And he became very poor, and one day his wife gives him her Mangala Sutram and says, sell this and get some food stuff for us so that we and our family and our children all can eat. And nAyanAr was carrying that golden Mangala Sutram, and as he was going, he sees somebody selling kungiliyam, the incense. He gives away the Mangala Sutram to him and buys the bag of kungiliyam, takes it to the temple, and is lost. He forgot all about his children's hunger, and he was in Shiva's worship. And then Shiva orders Kubera to fill their house with wealth and tells Kungiliya nAyanAr to go home and eat. So he comes home and finds his house is transformed. He is the richest man in Tirukadavur now, because Kubera has filled all the wealth in his house. So what I'm saying is, so Shiva wanted to give wealth to the Panabhadra. He could have given him directly in Madurai, but it is his Leela that he wanted to make Panabhadra meet the chEramAn perumAL nayanAr, and also to show the generosity of chEramAn perumAL nayanAr to the world. So that's how we have to interpret that. So this is one episode in chEramAn perumAl nayanAr's life. And then, as we know, he is a great devotee, and every day he will do Shiva Puja. And at the end of the puja, he will hear Shiva's anklets, sound of Shiva's anklet in his ears, as an indication that Shiva was pleased with his puja. So this used to happen every day. That every day he will do elaborate puja, and at the end of the puja he will hear Shiva's anklets sound in his ears. So this was going on as a normal thing for a long time. One day, as he had finished his puja, he never heard Shiva's anklet sound. Every day this will happen, but today it hasn't happened. So chEramAn perumAl nayanAr was puzzled. He thought that maybe I made some mistake in my puja. Maybe I was improper in my service to Shiva. That's why Shiva has not accepted my puja. And that thought kept bothering him. So he said, how the mind races and things, right? This may be only 5 minutes or 10 minutes, right? But in our mind, so many thoughts flood in those 5-10 minutes. So at the end of this short period, he says, if Shiva, if I have made a mistake and Shiva is not pleased with me and my worship, I don't want to live anymore. So he takes a sword and was about to kill himself. At that moment, he suddenly hears the Shiva's anklets sound in his ears. So he was relieved. And then Shiva tells him, sorry I'm late. I was listening to Sundarar's songs, and I was so engrossed in those songs that I forgot to come to you on time. Something to that effect. So chEramAn perumAl nayanAr is wondering, who is that Sundarar? That he must be such a great devotee, and his songs must be so great that Shiva was forgetting himself in the sweetness of his songs and forgot to come to me on time. I must go meet him. So after a few days, he tells the ministers that he is going to go to Chidambaram and to Chola kingdom to meet Sundarar. So he made arrangements for caretakers to take care of the kingdom when he is on his tour. So he does that, and then he sets on a journey to Chola kingdom. So as a king goes on a tour, all the entourage will come with him. So the huge entourage goes with him till the border of Chera kingdom, and at the border of the Chera kingdom, the king says, sends the ministers and all the others back, and only he has the essential people, right? The bodyguards and other servants to take care of his needs and all that, right? So as a small group, he sets on the journey to Chora kingdom. You can imagine from Keralam, he has to go on horse and foot and whatever to the Chera kingdom, to the Chora kingdom to Chidambaram. So it's a distance of something like 400-500 kilometers. It's a long journey in those days, and as he was going, as he was a great Shiva devotee, he visits various Shiva kshetrams on the way, different temples he visits, meets devotees, and finally, after some time, he comes to Chidambaram and is having darshan of Shiva in Chidambaram, and he composes a work called Ponvannathu Andadi. So chEramAn perumAL nayanAr is one of the saints who has sung songs, and his songs are found or compiled in the 11th volume of the 12 volumes. Remember the 12 volume Saiva canon? So we have the Sammada thevaram first 3, and Tirunavukara's thevaram next 3, and Sundara thevaram as the 7th. Manikavachakar's Tiruvachakam Tirukkovayar as the 8th. Collection of songs by other devotees as the 9th volume. Tirumula's Tirumandaram as the 10th volume. And in the 11th volume is a collection of songs by these devotees. And in that 11th volume, we have works of chEramAn perumAL nayanAr compiled. So Ponvannathu Andadi is a major work of 100 songs in Antadi fashion. Now I don't know whether it is there in Telugu now or not, but Antadi is where the final word or a phrase or a letter of one song will be the beginning word or beginning phrase of the next song. So it will be like a chain. So first song's end is the beginning of second song song's end is the beginning of third song, and that's how it goes, 100 songs. And normally the final song's final word will be the same as the first song's first word. So it will be like a garland. Anyway, so he composes that verse, work in Chidambaram, and then he learns that Sundarar is in Tiruvārur, because he came on the trip not only to have darshanam at Chidambaram but mainly to meet Sundarar. So from Chidambaram he starts on his journey to Tiruvārur, and if you have not been there, Tiruvārur is about roughly about 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers south from Chidambaram. So from Chidambaram you start and you go south and you come across major temples. You enter the Kaveri Delta region, so there are many temples. So there is famous temples like Sirgadi and Vaidiswaran Kovil and Mayiladurai and so on and so forth. So he worships at various temples and finally comes to Tiruvārur. And as I have said previously, Tiruvārur is a very big temple, major kshetram, and he comes to Sundarar's house, and Sundarar is overjoyed. The king of Chera king, the Chera king has come to him, and his Chera king not only is a Chera king but he is also a great Shiva devotee. So he is overjoyed to receive him, and Chera king falls at the feet of Sundarar. Sundarar falls at the feet of Chera king. They hug each other. So Chera king stays with Sundarar for quite some time. So they stay together. They become thick friends. They go to the temple. They go to Tiruvārur temple worship every day. They spend time in the company of other devotees who come to Tiruvārur. So they are very happy. And then after some time they want to go visit other temples. So with the Chera king, chEramAn perumAl nayanAr and Sundarar, they go to other temples like Nagapattinam and Vedaranyam, and then they go south to the Pandya kingdom. They go to Madurai. So when they go to Madurai, the Pandya king welcomes them. And it so happens that the Pandya king and Chora king, they are related, because they have the kings, they marry across the kingdom so that they have this bond and relationship and friendship and security and all that. So the Chora king also happened to be in Madurai at that time. So the Chera king, Chora king, Pandya king, they all are together at one point in a friendly manner. So Sundarar and the three kings, they visit the Madurai temple and they go to the nearby temple like Tirupparangundram. And Sundarar's sang a padhigam in Tirupparangundram, and in that padhigam, in the final song, he states this fact: I am worshipping Shiva with the three kings here in Tirupparangundram, documenting that the Chera, Chola, Pandya kings were with him when he worshipped in Tirupparangundram. Anyway, so they do all that, and then they come back to Thiruvarur, and then Chera king wants to go back to the Tirunajaykalam, because he is the king, right? So he wants to go back to the Chera kingdom, and Sundarar accompanies him. He wants to come with, he wants to have Sundarar visit him in Chera kingdom. So Sundarar accompanies Chera king, chEramAn perumAL nayanAr. They both go to Chera kingdom, and once they reach the palace, Sundarar is staying with Chera king, enjoying the friendship and royal company and all that. And he worships at the Shiva temple in Tirunajaykalam, and then after some time, Sundarar wants to come back to Thiruvarur. And chEramAn perumAl nayanAr also wants to come back along with Sundarar back to Thiruvarur. At the time, Sundarar says, you be here and take care of the kingdom. We will be friends. I will come back again. Then, so chEramAn gives a lot of wealth and all that. So Sundarar comes back to Thiruvarur. And after some time, Sundarar, maybe after a year or so, maybe after 2 years, whatever is the period, Sundarar comes back to Chera kingdom, visits chEramAn perumAl nayanAr. And when he is with chEramAn perumAl nayanAr the second trip, one day, when chEramAn perumAl was busy with other things, maybe he was in his royal duties, or maybe he was bathing or whatever. So Sundarar goes to the Tirunajaykalam temple, and he is worshipping Shiva in the Tirunajaykalam temple, and suddenly he feels that Sundarar feels that his time in this world is over, and he wants to go back to Kailasam. So he sings a padhigam, and Shiva sends his elephant, and Sundarar is on his way to Kailasam. And chEramAn perumAl nayanAr realizes that Sundarar is leaving this earthly domain and is going to Kailasam. So immediately he gets on his horse, and in the ear of the horse he chants a Panchakshara mantram, and on his horse chEramAn perumAl nayanAr also goes to Kailasam. So Sundarar reaches Kailasam, chEramAn perumAl nayanAr reaches Kailasam, and of course Sundarar goes inside, but chEramAn perumAl nayanAr is outside, and then Shiva calls him in and says, I didn't call you, how come you came? He says, Sundarar is here, I can't live away from Sundarar. So Sundarar came, and Sundarar's grace brought me here. And Shiva was pleased, and then chEramAn perumAl nayanAr sings one major work called Tirukkailai-ஞான-உலா. So he sings a song praising Shiva called, and that is also in the 11th volume. So with that, we come to the end of story of chEramAn perumAl nayanAr. So he was a great devotee and friend of Shiva, Sundarar, and he has composed songs. They are in the 11th volume. With that, we conclude chEramAn perumAl nayanAr story. Any comments, questions? We can discuss now. If you are on mute, unmute and ask. No questions? No comments?
Shiva, you said he sang something that was sung in at Kailas. the last
yes.
part, or okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah. So
how did this thing come back? I mean, how is someone else also was privy to this, which he sang and recorded it somewhere, or how do we know what he sang there at Kailas?
Yeah, very good question. So the two songs, right? Sundarar's final padhigam. You know, when Sundarar goes to Kailasam on the elephant that Shiva sent, Sundarar sings one padhigam, his final padhigam, on his way to Kailasam. So that, and chEramAn perumAL nayanmar, who sang this tiruttoṇḍattogai. So these two padhigams came to us through divine help. So Sundarar's padhigam, he says, in this padhigam he says, in the last song he says, "O Varuna, deliver this in Anjekalam." So Varunan delivers that padhigam in Anjekalam, and chEramAn perumAL nayanmar, this padhigam that he sang on in Kailasam, that he, they say Masatvan. Masatvan is the word that is used in the Periya Puranam. Basically, it is a Shastra. He gives it to Shastra, and the Shastra delivers it in a place called Tiruppadavur in Chola Kingdom. So that's how these two works, that Sundarar's last padhigam and chEramAn perumAL's this work, we have.
I see.
That is that's what Periya Puranam says. Yeah.
Okay. Shastra means Ayyappa.
Yes, Shastra is again, the Puranams and all that are complicated. Shastra is if you go to the south, there is something called Shastra Kovil or Ayyanar Kovil. So Ayyappa and Ayyanar, if you've been there will be Ayyanar. Have you seen Ayyanar temples?
Yeah, Ayyappa temple. Ayyappa, no?
Ayyappa is one. There's also Ayyanar. It's also known as Shastra.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I see. No, I haven't.
So what I'm saying is, so the Shastra is a old one, right? So Ayyappa, if you look at the historical legend associated with Ayyappa, it will be more recent.
Yeah.
But that legend is after that Ayyappa and that legends are all maybe 500 years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, something in that range. But these are all 1,500 years ago, 1,400, 1,300 years ago, and Shastra worship was there even before. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Shastra is a Shiva devotee, another devotee.
Correct.
Shiva. Okay. Thank you, Shiva.
Yeah. So maybe one day we will listen to some songs of chEramAn perumAL, but the Ponnvanna Tandadi is a very nice one. There are some, it's 100 songs, and some songs are easy to follow, some songs are complex to follow, but a lot of songs are there. Wonderful songs. So continuing on our story, we have next devotee on the list is Kadarkali gaNanathan Adiyarkkum Adiyen. Kali is Sirgali, Kadal is sea, gaNanathan is the name of the devotee. So I am devotees of gaNanathan of Sirgali, that is near the sea. That's the meaning of the line. Kadarkali gaNanathan Adiyarkkum Adiyen. gaNanathan, who hails from Sirgali, which is on the coast. I am devotee of all his devotees. So gaNanathan, as you can see from this description in the tiruttoṇḍattogai, lived in Sirgali, and as you know, with the moment we say Sirgali, we should remember Tirunjana Sambandar. That is the town of Tirunjana Sambandar. So gaNanathan lived after Tirunjana Sambandar, so maybe before Sundarar, or maybe contemporary of Sundarar. So gaNanathan was a Brahmana living in Sirgali, and he was an ardent Shiva devotee, and he would help everybody who was doing Shiva service. That is the important thing, right? We have all kinds of Shiva service, right? Shiva service is not just worshipping Shiva at home or doing puja. So all kinds of things that are done. For example, we have people who keep gardens, people who pluck flowers, people who make garlands, people who sing songs, people who make copies of the books. All those kind of things. People who work in the temple, all kinds of things are there. So he was the one who was helping everybody who was doing Shiva service, and also encouraging everybody to do Shiva service. So not just helping, but also encouraging and enabling and directing, guiding people. So he motivated people. So he created an army, in a sense, right? A devotee army. So he created people who are depending on everybody's individual skills. He will say, oh, you are good at this, you are good at singing, so sing in the temple. Oh, you are you have got good handwriting, why don't you make copies of the Tirumurai songs? Oh, you are good at gardening, why don't you maintain a flower garden? Like that. He encouraged everybody and helped everybody, and he was a great devotee of Tirunjana Sambandar. So he was always worshipping Tirunjana Sambandar and helping everybody, and this is how he reached Shiva's feet, as a person who was highly devoted to Tirunjana Sambandar and who was a great servant and who directed and guided and encouraged people to enter into Shiva service. So he was sort of a leader who was guiding people to become Shiva devotees and telling them how to be a Shiva devotee, how to take care of things, how to be a good Shiva devotee, and all that. So this is his brief summary of his service that we see in Periya Puranam. We don't have much more details than this in Periya Puranam. It just says that this is how he enabled Shiva service. And then we go to the next devotee. Ar konda verkutran kalandai kon adiyen. Kon means king. Kalandai is the name of the town or the name of the region. And Kutran is the name of the person. So Kutran, who is the king of Kalandai. And Ar konda vel. Vel means what vel is, right? The javelin kind of thing that kings have, right? What Muruga has in his hand, that's a vel. And Ar means sharp. So the Kutran, who is holding a sharp vel and who is the king of Kalandai, I am a devotee of his. Okay. And now this is all we have in tiruttoṇḍattogai. So if you go to Periya Puranam says that the kUtRuva nayanAr is known as kUtRuva nayanAr, and he was a local chief. In those days, how the kings are, right? You have a big king like Chola king or a Chera king or a Pandya king, and then you have smaller local areas, right? For administratively, they will have local kings and local small kingdoms who will be sort of semi-independent, ruling their part, but they will be paying tribute to the bigger king. And so kUtRuva nayanAr was one such local small king, but he was a great Shiva devotee, and he had great valor, and so he was able to capture neighboring kingdoms. In those days, it was part of the Raja Dharmam, right? The king, typically kings want to expand their kingdom, so they will want to keep the neighboring kingdoms under their power so that they are safe and secure and peace and prosperity exists, all that, right? So the kings often will try to expand their power and ensure that they are a bigger and bigger king. So kUtRuva nAyanAr, even though he was a Shiva devotee, was a local king, so he was able to capture neighboring kingdoms and became more and more powerful. So that way he became, he had captured a large area of the kingdom, large areas around his kingdom, and became a sort of a bigger king. And so his kingdom included parts of Chola kingdom, including Chidambaram. So he wanted to become a sort of an emperor. You are a king, and then maybe if you want to become an emperor, then there are some rituals, and you wear a bigger kiradam or whatever, right? So he goes to the Chidambaram priest. They are the ones who will place the crown on the king's head and bless him and do all that. So he goes to the Chidambaram temple and worships there, and then requests the Chidambaram priest, I want you to crown me as the emperor. And the Chidambaram priests were shocked at his request, and they say, we don't crown anybody except the proper Chola lineage king. We will not crown you as emperor. So they refuse. So the king was sort of heartbroken. This is what has happened. How do I deal with this? So he worships and prays to Shiva. Shiva, in a sense, the Brahmins are not willing to crown me as emperor. I want to have your holy feet on my head as my crown. So he prays, and then Shiva bestows his grace on him and says, my feet will be on your head all the time, don't worry. So with that he was satisfied, and he was happily ruling his kingdom, and then finally he reaches Shiva's feet. So this is the brief story of kUtRuva nAyanAr. Any questions, comments? Okay. If not, we will take up the 7th verse in the next session, and we'll look at the stories that are there in that. As you can see, as you go further into 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th verses, the stories, many of the stories will become very short because we don't have that much details. But there are some stories which will be longer. In the 7th verse we will see Pugatchorar, we will have some events. Kadalnage Adivattan, you will see some events. So there are some events, but there will be shorter stories as you go along. So with that, we will conclude today's session. We will meet again next time. Tiruttoṇḍattogai.